Hi guys!
I'm Naomi.
And I'm EJ, and today we're gonna talk about independent foreign policy.
But first, let's look back at history.
In 1892, the Filipinos first echoed their desire for independence through the Katipunan. But this process towards independence and self-governance was interrupted by Japan during World War II. Then MacArthur said, "I came through and I shall return." Through the help of America, the country was liberated from Japan. And in 1946, our independence from US was proclaimed.
A new nation is born.
However, the Philippines was not able to fully rejoice this liberation, for the country was destroyed both in physical and emotional sense. Because of this, the Philippines needed the help of US and asked for economic aid, which resulted in the Philippines being subservient to America in terms of foreign policy.
But wait, what is a foreign policy?
A foreign policy is the vision of a desired outcome in interacting with another state or nation. It aims to preserve and enhance national security, promote the attainment of economic security, as well as the welfare and protection of the Filipinos that are overseas.
Now, here's the interesting part. We'll be going over how the thought of having independent foreign policy or IFP in the Philippines began.
It was during the 1930s that President Manuel Quezon and his advisors started to pursue an independent foreign policy. They were worried about the ability of the future republic to hold on its own, which led them to choose a self-reliant economy and defense institution for the country. This included the lessening of military bases of the Americans in the Philippines as the Tidings-McDuffie Act of 1934 was passed. However, the IFP did not last because of the Second World War. As an effect, the country became dependent on Washington for trade, investment, and assistance, making the country politically and economically dependent to US. Given the fact that the Philippines at that time was still in the process of rebuilding from the damage of war. During the 1950s, people started to question the Philippine dependent policy. Senator Clara Recto was prominent among these. Recto pointed out that the Philippines could not always rely on the US. He said that the Philippine government should direct its foreign policy towards other Asian nations, stating that we have not reached out to our neighboring countries. He also stressed that we need to have a government that believes on our independence, an efficient government that will know how to lead us along a course of self-help and self-reliance, an honest government whose credit will not be questioned by the world. Generally, he wanted the Philippines to have a separate foreign policy from that of US.
Wait, so what happened with all his proposals?
Well, these proposals of Recto were still ahead of the nation at that time.
It was in the 1960s when there was a drastic change in nationalist outlook of many leaders, businessmen, and intellectuals. These people, the so-called ideological nationalists, advocated the nationalization of the economy and education, the removal of US bases, and an independent but active foreign policy.
Then what happened after that?
Well, President Marcos made the move towards IFP.
Marcos founded the New Development Diplomacy. It was designed to cater to the needs of economic and social development and reduce the excessive reliance of the Philippines to the United States. In the 1973 Constitution, Marcos redefined foreign policy as the safeguarding of territorial integrity and national dignity, and emphasized increased regional cooperation and collaboration. In the early part of martial law, Marcos took initiatives aimed at projecting an IFP by attempting to cut special relations with the US. The 1980s marked the decline of Philippine diplomatic initiatives because of growing internal weaknesses in Marcos' regime. The Philippines had record of trade deficit. Thus, Marcos found it necessary to maintain relations with the US, for it was the main supporter for his regime's activities. As a consequence of his dependence to the United States, President Marcos found himself vulnerable to American diplomatic pressures.
Oh, the Philippines just had massive foreign debt. Then what happened?
Well, after his fall, a new constitution was promulgated and provided a clear and independent foreign policy.
In the 1987 Constitution, it already emphasized that the state will pursue an independent foreign policy. It was also evident how it focused more on the identity of Filipinos individually and how they can contribute to the economic growth of the country.
So, how is our foreign policy now?
Well, up until now, we still follow this constitution.
The Philippine Foreign Service Act of 1991 gives mandate to the Department of Foreign Affairs to implement the three pillars of Philippine foreign policy.
So, what's different now with Duterte's administration?
If you remember, Duterte announced in 2016 that he will separate from the US and build stronger relationships with other countries.
I announce my separation from the United States. Both the military but economic also. Majority of the Philippines is veering towards China.
In the present time, the president shifted from US to China as an ally. He also emphasized that his administration will pursue an independent foreign policy.
We have every right to pursue an independent foreign policy.
From what we have seen, the Philippines has been pursuing an independent foreign policy for decades. In this pursuit, various people raised their concern for the prime interest of our country. Amendments were made, and it is in the Philippine Foreign Service Act of 1991 that our foreign policy was proclaimed to be pursued as independent. As a nation, we have developed from being dependent to the United States to being independent with their own foreign policy.
Generally, the main goal of a country's foreign policy is to advance the interests of the country and its people while maintaining friendly relations with other nations.
Well, these two are separate objectives, but the bottom line is always the pursuit of national interest. And when we say that our foreign policy is independent,
We are saying that no other state should be allowed to dictate how the Philippines operate.